We are just now getting this breaking news that's coming into us from Fox. I'm going to have our producers behind the scenes change the banner, but right now this has just been confirmed, Brian, over the air, that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, has been killed in those strikes. Fox is now reporting that on screen. They're having their reporter speaking on it now as he's live in Tel Aviv. But once again, folks, for just joining us here at home, we've been waiting for this information. We had gotten some insight before from our partners there at Reuters. They were able to talk to us to let us know that Netanyahu, the prime minister, as he just had statements a little while ago, said that there were signs that the prime minister, that the Ayatollah was no longer anymore. This is what he said, according to Aisha Hasni with Fox News. This morning, we have destroyed the compound of the tyrant Khamenei, many of the signs showing that he is no longer. That is exactly what he said in his speech. We have just been informed by Fox News confirming that Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, has now been killed in these strikes. And so as we're getting this breaking news, and we still have Brian on the line here. Brian, I'm going to have you jump in here once again as we're talking about this. This is the moment that we've been waiting to hear. We didn't have confirmation. It was suspected. It was put out there on the internet. I had told folks earlier today we won't be confirming anything until we have it from our trusted sources. But a huge moment to see that Khamenei has now been pronounced dead.
Yes, and I would guess that he is not the only one. He has a son who's very powerful. He may have been killed as well. We'll wait for confirmation on that, and much of the leadership. There was a bifurcation of efforts here, Christina. The Israelis were moving in for a decapitation strike, cleaning out the leadership of the country. The American targets were different. And so the Israelis have exacted the ultimate punishment to the Iranian leadership. Now, what happens after this is what's going to be very interesting. The Revolutionary Guard there, the military, very oppressive people domestically, they have a choice to make. There's now a power vacuum, potentially, if it's not only Khamenei who's gone, but the leadership, to do exactly what Donald Trump asked them to do, which is lay down your arms, and you'll get what he called immunity, so that the people of Iran may rise up and form a new government. But this strike against the leadership didn't just kill the Ayatollah. It probably killed many other people in the leadership.
And so there you have it. That's from Bill Maluzhin. He's citing Trey Yingst, who is now reporting with Fox News on this newest information, that it's saying a senior Israeli official is the one who confirmed to our colleagues that Iran's supreme leader is now dead. And so we're watching all of this again unfold in real time alongside with you. And so it was the Iranian supreme leader who was killed in these strikes as a part of this massive joint military operation between the United States and Israel. Israel's ambassador told this also to officials in Washington, D.C. Other officials are now confirming to different media outlets all around the United States that this is true. The 86-year-old Khamenei led Iran for 35 years, making him one of the world's longest-serving authoritarian rulers. His death, though, is a massive blow to the regime and could accelerate, as we've been speaking with here with Brian, on its collapse, which the United States and Israeli forces have staged as a goal of this operation. The killing is going to continue to set off a succession crisis with no clear answer, as Brian was just discussing. I do want to note that under Iran's constitution, a council of clerks is meant to select a new leader, supreme leader. But Israel's strikes have also targeted senior Islamic Revolutionary Guards, that's the IRGC that we've been speaking about, their commanders and political leaders as well, leaving the regime's chain of command in disarray at this moment. And so that's the latest breaking news just coming into our newsroom. Fox News now reporting that Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, has now been killed in these strikes. And so for folks who are just now joining us, you're going to continue to give you these updates and some of the fallout that has been happening in the aftermath. This just in from the Associated Press talking about what's happening regionally there, that hundreds of people are now demonstrating in Baghdad in support of Iran against those attacks that were launched by Israel and the United States.
We are getting information from Israeli sources that the Ayatollah is dead. This is breaking news again coming from Israeli sources that the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, is dead. Again, we're going to go to Jeremy Diamond. Jeremy, the strikes coming this morning that were targeting senior leadership, that's what we knew, targeting senior leadership there in Iran. And now we can say from Israeli sources that the Ayatollah of Iran, the supreme leader, is dead. What more are you learning there in Israel?
That's right, Jessica. Two Israeli sources telling me and my colleague Tal Shalev that Israel has confirmed that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed as a result of those Israeli strikes that took place earlier today. One of these sources saying that Israel actually has photographic evidence of Khamenei showing his dead body. The second source told me that an official announcement is in the works, although it is possible that the Israelis will allow President Trump and the United States to make this announcement officially. But this is enormous breaking news here that the Israeli government is confirming that the supreme leader of Iran was killed in Israeli strikes earlier today. This is a day that many Israeli government officials have hoped would come eventually. It is also, we should note, a day that many Iranian dissidents, Iranian protesters had hoped would eventually come. And indeed, it has come now. And it is an earth-shattering moment for the Middle East and for the future of Iran. We should note, however, that the supreme leader's death is not necessarily indicative of the Iran regime collapsing altogether. This regime is not based off of one person alone. It is a system that is multi-layered, and we know that the supreme leader understood very well that he could potentially be targeted for assassination should the United States and Israel choose to carry out massive strikes on Iran as they did today. And in recent weeks and months, he has been preparing for potential lines of succession should that actually take place. Now, we are still waiting, of course, for any confirmation from the United States as well as to the supreme leader having been killed. But two Israeli sources familiar with the matter telling us now that the supreme leader was killed in Israeli strikes today. One last note on this is that we have also been hearing about the division of labor between the United States and Israel as it pertains to these strikes. U.S. officials have been very clear that their strikes have been focused on military targets and that the strikes targeting senior Iranian leaders, such as the supreme leader, were being conducted by Israel and not by the United States. Ultimately, that may very well be a distinction without a difference, given the high level of coordination between the United States and Israel in preparing and carrying out these strikes. But this is obviously an enormous moment in the Middle East, something that we anticipated could potentially be a target of any Israeli or U.S. strikes on Iran. And indeed, now not only a target, but confirmed by Israeli sources that the supreme leader of Iran is dead.
Indeed, big news out of the Middle East, the potential to reshape so many dynamics there. But again, as Jeremy notes, not a straight line to regime change. This is a piece of it, but it is a big piece of it. This is enormous news. Jeremy, I want you to stand by because we have seen those missiles that have been coming to Israel throughout the day. So stay with us. I do want to bring Jim Sciutto back in. Jim, this is very big news. And again, Jeremy, it is. And so help people understand, contextualize for them that what this means, that Iran's supreme leader has been killed in these strikes by the U.S. and Israel.
These strikes are now officially decapitation strikes, right? Strikes that were intended via Israeli military action, to be clear, to take out Iran's most senior leadership. And the man you see there, Ali Khamenei, is Iran's most senior leader with enormous, certainly political power in that country, but also religious authority in that country. The structure of Iranian government being that, yes, it has a president elected, but the supreme leader lies at the top of the government. And that is that man you see speaking there, which Israeli sources are now telling CNN was killed in these strikes. Again, to my point earlier, Jessica, prior to this morning, there'd been an enormous amount of speculation as to just how far one, the U.S. was willing to go, but Israel as well, if they were striking together. And now we know they were willing to go as far as taking out Iran's most senior leader. Now, we had reported earlier that he was not the only target of these strikes, that other senior military and other leaders in Iran were targeted. We don't know their status at this point, but as we reported earlier in the day, Israeli officials were becoming more confident over time today that they had hit at least some of their targets. Listen, in Iran, does that mean that suddenly there will be a new government, a new leader, one friendlier to the U.S.? No. An enormous network and structure of leadership and power remains in that country, military, economic, political, and otherwise. But to take out the supreme leader is a significant change. And of course, the question is, how far does that change go? Does it weaken the government to the degree that the government collapses? Does it weaken it to a degree that the protesters that we saw take on this government quite bravely in recent weeks are inspired to go out into the streets again, right? I mean, that's what President Trump was encouraging them to do explicitly in a statement this morning. Now, that's quite a risky proposition, given that government retains enormous power, and they showed they were willing to use it to deadly extent in the many thousands of protesters they killed in recent weeks. Those are still the open questions, but we have one question answered. Was Israel willing to go so far as to take out the supreme leader of Iran? And the answer is yes, and they had success doing so.
Right. And now the big question is what comes next? Jim Sciutto, stand by. I want to bring in Barak Ravid, CNN political and global affairs analyst. He's also a global affairs correspondent at Axios. Barak, I know you spoke with President Trump earlier today. Again, if you are just joining us, our breaking news is that Iran's supreme leader has been killed in these strikes. That is coming from Israeli sources. Barak, we're still waiting to hear from the president, from the U.S. government, but the Israeli sources confirming that. What more are you learning? What did the president tell you?
So first, just about Khamenei, I think around 30, 40 minutes ago, the Israeli ambassador to Washington, Yechiel Leiter, updated several U.S. officials and members of Congress that Israeli intelligence shows that Khamenei has been killed and his body was taken out of the rubble in the compound in Tehran that was attacked. I spoke to President Trump a little bit before 1 p.m. While he was in Mar-a-Lago. We spoke for around 5 minutes. The president sounded, to me at least, pretty calm and confident that things are going according to plan. I think the situation with Khamenei was one of the main things he was tracking at that moment. And what was interesting in what he told me is that I asked him, how long is this going to continue? And he said, I have several off-ramps. I can go long and take the whole thing, meaning take over Iran, something that, I don't think that's something that is seriously being considered.
That's quite a statement, yeah.
Yeah. Or I can go on for another 2-3 days and then tell the Iranians, we'll see you again in a few years if you try and rebuild your nuclear program, your missile program, meaning that Donald Trump, at least my impression from the conversation with him, is that he's looking to end this thing within a few days and basically put an ultimatum to the Iranians. We can get a deal, or you can try and rebuild your program, and then we'll just bomb you again if you try to do this. And I think that was one of the messages that U.S. officials that just briefed reporters, I think 10 minutes ago, said that when the 12-day war ended after Operation Midnight Hammer, the U.S. told Iran, if you try to rebuild, we will come again. And those U.S. officials said that the Iranians, according to U.S. intelligence, did try and rebuild the program. So we know from satellite imagery that the Iranians started infrastructure work in several of the nuclear sites that were attacked in June. We do not know whether they really tried to resume a nuclear program, meaning enrichment and other activities. One of the interesting things I heard from President Trump is that he told me that he thinks that Operation Midnight Hammer allowed Operation Epic Fury to go forward. Because President Trump claimed that if he did not go on that operation last June, if he did not order a strike on those 3 nuclear facilities, Iran would have been much, much closer to a nuclear weapon, maybe even have a nuclear weapon by now, according to what President Trump said. And that would make the current operation much harder, maybe even impossible.
Retired Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie joins me now, former commander of United States Central Command. General, it's great to have you with us. We've talked before. You might have heard me mention the CENTCOM release that just came moments ago. No casualties, no injuries, no significant or even nominal damage to U.S. military facilities in the region. Evaluate what that means based on the war planning that you have some familiarity with, prepared before this was launched.
Well, Major, it's a good start. A lot of hard days ahead, but you're about where you wanted to be. I think we're in the opening stages of what could promise to be a fairly lengthy campaign of at least several days. And we'll see how it plays out here over the next 48 to 72 hours. And what I think is going to happen, Major, is this. Probably the Iranian missile attacks that we have seen to date were pre-coordinated, pre-authorized by the supreme leader in the case of an attack. That's why you see relatively small numbers. Over the next 2 or 3 days, they will attempt to get those numbers up and launch more missiles. The essential calculus will be our ability to prevent that from happening by striking where the missiles are stored, how they are moved, where they are moved to, and how they are launched, as well as command and control nodes. We'll work very hard to suppress that, as well as applying our ballistic missile defense systems across the region. So we would like to reduce the number of effective Iranian missile strikes pretty dramatically here over the next few days, and we'll see if we're able to do that. All the while continue to prosecute our offensive campaign against Iran and against its leaders in particular.
Help the audience understand, General, how we have pre-positioned assets to do those 2 things you just outlined.
Well, over the past few weeks, Central Command at the direction of the president, as far as I can tell, and what I read is really what I see from the media, we have brought ballistic missile defense systems into the theater. We brought warships into the theater. At the same time, we've undertaken some measures to reduce the visibility and presence of our forces at places that they can strike. As people have made the point, you can't move an airfield, you can't move a hangar, but you can move the people that work on the airplanes, and you can move the airplanes. And we're very good at doing that, and we practice that a lot. Central Command is very adept at doing that. We did it while I was in command. General Kurilla, my successor, has done it, and now Admiral Cooper is doing the same thing. So we're taking a broad variety of measures to protect our forces in the theater, protect our citizens in the theater, work with our friends and allies in the region while we prosecute these strikes on Iran.
Central Command also said something else that caught our eye, General. I'd like you to offer an appraisal. It said, for the first time, low-cost attack drones were deployed as part of this mission. What does that mean?
Well, we've always been on the wrong side of the cost imposition curve when it comes to sophisticated weapons. Ours are typically very good, very effective, and very expensive. What you'd like to do is get some that are very effective that aren't very expensive. And thanks to a lot of work, really, by this Department of War and by CENTCOM, we're beginning to deploy some of these systems. An American combat system does not, in and of itself, need to be recklessly expensive in order to be effective. And that has always been sort of the Achilles heels of our systems, in that we produce wonderful systems, the best systems in the world, but they are prohibitively expensive. So now I think we're understanding that if you're going to play at scale in this domain, and in particular in the domain of unmanned aerial systems as well as unmanned at-sea systems, you have to be able to get the price point down. We're beginning to do that, and I think it's a remarkable achievement.
Walk our audience, General, through the risk probabilities of the next 72 hours from your perspective.
So I think we will continue to strike. We will continue to strike leadership targets. We will continue to strike air defense targets, probably go against their missiles as well, as I've already described, because what we want to do now is we want to reduce Iran's ability to strike our bases, the cities of our friends in the region, those civilian targets that have been discussed earlier in the broadcast. We want to reduce their ability to do that. And in order to do that, you've got to go after those targets. You have to look at where those missiles are stored, how they are transported, how they are fired. We've worked years and years on plans to do this, and we're probably in execution of those plans right now. At the same time, we'll keep the pressure up against Iranian leadership. Now, the one thing that particularly concerns me, and I know I'm sure it concerns commanders at CENTCOM and at the national level, is the Iranians have the opportunity to mine the Strait of Hormuz. I think we'll watch that very carefully. I would assume we've taken some measures to make it hard for them to do that already. We'll look at that very hard. Of course, that would have a globally disruptive effect if it occurred. That's the closest thing, I would argue, to an atomic bomb that the Iranians have to throw into the system right now. But we can see them as they prepare to do it. We can take measures to make it hard for them to do it. And if they do choose to do it, we can ultimately sweep those mines. It won't be a process of a day or two. It'll take a little bit longer than that, but we can do it if necessary. So I think we're going to look for all those things over the next few days. I understood very clearly that, the president's call for the Iranian people to rise up. And I have, it's a truism that it's hard for a popular revolt to arise in Iran. And I've said that myself several times. But, our track record actually at predicting the stability of totalitarian regimes in the region when under extreme stress is very limited. Nobody saw Assad's fall in Syria coming. That took us all by complete surprise. In fact, when I look at something like what's happening in Iran, you could almost use the Ernest Hemingway quote about going bankrupt. How'd you go bankrupt? Well, gradually and then suddenly. And I think we may put the regime under pressure that it's not used to. And hopefully, and I presume we are, doing things that aren't visible on TV cameras, aren't visible to the news, that make it possible for the people of Iran to actually press back against the tyranny that is the Iranian government.
Well, let's press on that for just a moment, General, because I've talked to people in the Marine Corps and in the infantry, and they take great pride operationally in what they believe is a truism, that you need a bullet and a bayonet and boots to achieve things like regime change, that aerial power alone does not affect that. Evaluate whether that, in this case, from your perspective, is or isn't a truism.
I think you need a bullet, a boot, maybe a bayonet at a critical point. You don't need it all over Iran. You need it where government is seated. You need it where leaders are. That doesn't mean you have to invade in order to do that. That means you need a proxy force, or you need people, brave people in Iran who are willing to take those actions. They need to be supplied with that bayonet. They need to be supplied with that bullet. They need to be supplied with that weapon. And I would hope that we are doing those things right now in order to facilitate that, because the real pressure in Iran, the ideal pressure would rise from inside Iran. And I know very clearly if the supreme leader's dead, his immediate successor might come from further to the right. That's possible. But let's see what happens if, in fact, that is the case.
The president cautioned the country, possibly warned is a better word, that casualties might very well come. Was he driving at special operators or Navy or air personnel?
I think he's just making a very wise observation about the nature of this fight. We've got aviators that are flying over Iran. We may very well have special ops guys and gals that are doing other things inside Iran. I don't know, don't claim to know, don't want to know. But all of them are at risk. And I think what he's doing is he's just fulfilling one of his responsibilities as the commander-in-chief to let the American people know that we have forces at risk today. But it's a good mission. As he said, it's a noble mission with rare opportunity here to change the fundamental nature of one of the most repressive governments in the world that really markets nothing but death and terror.
Terminology matters, as you well know, General. Is this a series of airstrikes, or is this a full-fledged war?
Well, it looks like a campaign to me, and I'll leave it to others to discuss whether or not it's a war. It looks like it's not a series of disparate strikes. We have worked for plans at Central Command for many years, of which I have some ownership and authorship, that envision a lengthy campaign or a short campaign with all kinds of adds and takes that we can adjust based on the guidance of the President of the United States. The key thing is what a combatant commander does is you develop plans that support the president's intent and the president's vision for what he wants to accomplish. And I believe Central Command is doing that right now. And I think over the next few days, we will unroll some things that perhaps are not apparent now.
Former General of Central Command, Frank McKenzie, Marine Corps. I appreciate the time, sir, very much. I want to bring in CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer, who joins us, I believe, from London. Elizabeth, you've been speaking to people in the region. What are you hearing?
I've been speaking to longtime contacts and friends in Tehran. It's night. Everything is very quiet. People are staying home. Most of the explosions were not within earshot. So what's going on in the country is very difficult for them to understand because, of course, state television is feeding them a lot of rubbish and nonsense, including, for example, the Revolutionary Guard claiming to have already killed 200 American military personnel and so on. But you know, most Iranians are wise to the fact that they can't trust state television. The question is if they can they get access to news sources they can trust? And it appears that the internet and the WhatsApp messaging, Telegram messaging is working again. So Iranians will be relying on us, the Western media, to tell them what's going on in their own country. They're staying home.
Elizabeth, did you have any sense at all, and it would be difficult to have a precise sense, but even general sense that the reaction that you got was, hey, this might be good, or foreboding about what may come?
I think Iranians are really scared. It's all very well for President Trump to urge them to take back their government, but thousands of them have just died. Pushing back against their government to actually mount a full-fledged takeover would no doubt mean rivers of blood. Iran has strict gun control laws. People are not armed, so they haven't got weapons. But most crucially, they haven't got leaders. The Iranian regime, to preserve itself, has exiled, jailed, or killed every gifted leader who might have emerged to take the opposition somewhere toward better government. And so I think Iranians tell me they're much more afraid of this thing descending into civil war and chaos, where the various power centers inside the regime begin to fight one another, and the people are just caught in the crossfire.
Yes, Sandra, we just got this in literally 2 minutes ago, but Fox News can confirm that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead following Israeli strikes against his compound and location earlier today. A senior Israeli official confirming this news. Earlier tonight, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu describing the strikes not only against the supreme leader, but against much of the Iranian leadership. We know the breakdown in strikes focused on leadership for the Israelis and military targets initially for the Americans, and has since expanded as this campaign is expected to continue in the days and possibly even weeks ahead. As we're looking at the current situation across the region, we're also gathering new information on what the Israelis have been doing against Iran. We are told from a military official that the largest Israeli Air Force sortie against any country in the world was conducted this morning with 200 Israeli fighter jets targeting 500 different locations, dropping hundreds of munitions on a variety of different targets inside of Iran. The Israelis, while they were going after leadership, were also looking to neutralize the incoming ballistic missile fire that has targeted their country throughout the day. Sirens sounded across Israel throughout the afternoon, sending millions of people into bomb shelters. But again, the takeaway here, the Israelis have killed Iran's supreme leader. That is being confirmed to Fox News by a senior Israeli official. John, Sandra?
Okay, so Trey, you're obviously breaking that news for us just now. We'll be looking for reaction, obviously, on the ground in Iran and all over the Middle East region.
Absolutely. This is a major blow to the Iranian regime. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, was not a figurehead. He was the man in charge of decisions as it relates to Iran's nuclear program, their expanding ballistic missile program, the hardline positions that made it impossible for the Americans to reach a diplomatic solution with the Iranians. And that led to a variety of conversations behind the scenes. And I can also report, having just gotten off of a background call with a U.S. official, that there were attempts made by the Trump administration, really olive branches given to the Iranians at the negotiating table, asking them to find a solution on the nuclear issue. These other issues, their ballistic missile program, their support of regional proxies, and even the crackdown on protesters, the Trump administration initially was willing to ignore those issues in order to get an agreement together on the nuclear program. And they simply were not willing to come to the table with reasonable demands. And despite the efforts by top negotiators that were sent to Oman and to Switzerland, whether it be Special Envoy Steve Witkoff or President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, who we know had been working across the region around the clock over the past year, not just on this issue, but also to get a ceasefire in Gaza and implement the new Board of Peace to create stability in the region. The understanding was that the Iranian regime and the Supreme Leader himself, these were the last hurdles for the region between stability and instability. And this decision was made overnight by President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to launch these extensive strikes across Iran in order to neutralize that threat. President Trump overnight, when he made those remarks, said there could be American casualties. This is going to be a difficult fight because no war is easy, despite the fact that by tomorrow the Israelis believe they will have air superiority over the skies of Iran. But we have seen the Iranian response today, not just here in Israel, with the ballistic missile fire targeting major population centers, including Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, but also Gulf countries, Bahrain, the UAE, and Qatar. A regional diplomat telling Fox News this evening that 8 people were injured in Qatar during one of the attacks. One of them is in critical condition. And so there are serious consequences to this counterattack by Iran. But again, tonight, the news that is breaking across the region, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, according to a senior Israeli official, has been killed.
So, Trey, if that report from the senior Israeli official is correct, the big question is what comes next. The Ayatollah was 86 years old. I imagine that in the theocracy of Iran, they have got clerics lined up to take that position in the same way that they have planes lined up over Ben Gurion on the landing approach. So what does that mean for the future there in terms of the theocracy if that were to continue?
Israel is looking east right now to the threat from Iran, but they're also looking north and south. Iran's largest proxies are Hezbollah, the Lebanese militant group in southern Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen. Hezbollah, according to an intelligence official I spoke to recently, still has thousands of rockets and missiles, and around half of them are within range of Israeli cities. And this is a serious threat still posed to Israel, despite the fact that the Israelis have degraded and destroyed much of the Hezbollah arsenal. It still poses a threat to Israel. You might remember, as we reported throughout the past 2.5 years, the Israelis decapitated the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, with a strike in the Dakhya neighborhood of southern Beirut. They went after the missile launching positions we saw on the ground there in southern Lebanon as the Israelis meticulously moved field by field and cave by cave to go after these positions that had been dug into the sides of mountains. But despite those efforts, this is an organization that had decades of support from the Iranian regime, and they were able to smuggle in missiles and rocket components that now make up what is left of that arsenal. And while it is a smaller arsenal than before, it is a threat. And Hezbollah in the past, just the past several days, has said that if Iran's supreme leader was targeted, they would get directly involved in this war. And so that is where Israel is focused right now. As it relates to the situation on the ground in Iran, we do have to step back amid all of this military action and these serious decisions that were made by President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There is still an understanding about how the structure of the Iranian regime operates. Iran's supreme leader reportedly had already prepared successors. Iran's IRGC had already prepared successors for the top commanders of their military, understanding that if a war erupted, these would be the individuals targeted in such a conflict. And so this isn't over. This is actually just beginning. But it does raise questions about the future of the region and where things are headed once this does conclude.
Also crossing right now, a source familiar to Fox News is saying some Gulf partners are responding to Iran defensively and offensively. Trey, since the last time you joined us, top of the last hour, we got word that President Trump had sat down for this several-minute interview with Axios, in which he said he believes he has several off-ramps from Operation Epic Fury, talking about how long this could take. It could end in 2 or 3 days, said the president. He could tell the Iranians, see you again in a few years if you start rebuilding your nuclear and missile programs. This was about a 5-minute interview that the president conducted, but suggesting there could still be a diplomatic solution or opportunity, Trey.
Absolutely. This is the Peace Through Strength initiative that the president ran on when he was running for his second term. And when you look at the region, there are players in the region, including the Iranians, that often only understand strength. And that is a fact in the Middle East. And it's the reason that the Israelis have approached the conflicts that they are involved in the way that they have. As it relates to Iran and the possibility of a diplomatic off-ramp, if this does continue for a number of days and the regime is weakened, we have already heard in interviews that took place today from other outlets with Iran's foreign minister, who indicated at least a small interest in a diplomatic path, understanding that at the end of this, the Iranian regime had one major factor, one lever to pull, and that was their ballistic missile program. Now, while they still will fire ballistic missiles, likely in the days ahead, when they have no nuclear weapon, they have a limited supply of missile launchers, and their regional proxies have been decimated over the past 2.5 years, it raises a very significant question. What does Iran have left to fight with if this is an extended campaign that lasts for several days or several weeks? They certainly do pose a threat. They have anti-ship missiles. They have ballistic missiles. But their ability that they had, and really we should look at October of 2023, the ability that they had before the war began with Hamas launching the brutal massacre into southern Israel on the morning of October 7th. When you think back 2.5 years ago, this is a totally different Iranian regime. It is a weakened regime. It is a regime that cracked down on protesters, slaughtering, according to President Trump, 32,000 of their own civilians. That's behavior from a regime that is cornered, understanding that they have very limited options of how to respond. And so the days ahead will be quite interesting to see how the Israelis and the Americans move forward with strikes against Iran. But certainly in these situations, we have often seen temporary ceasefires when conflict erupts in order to get some sort of deal together. And just one concluding point here that I want to note. Back during the 12-day war in June of 2025, as we reported here on the ground amid heavy incoming ballistic missile fire, that war was unfolding with casualties here in Israel, more than 24 people killed. The Israelis launching a series of strikes across Iran, trying to take out those air defense systems. But it was when President Trump ordered Operation Midnight Hammer that the Iranians suddenly responded just once against a base in Qatar, the Al Udeid base, and then in a way backed off. And it was President Trump, one man, who was able to decide the outcome of what comes next. And I remember a moment here on the ground. Israeli fighter jets were in the skies on their way to continue with the bombing campaign against Iran, and President Trump got on the phone and called off the strikes. So when the president feels that there's an opportunity for a deal, there are options and off-ramps to be taken.
All right. Trey, confirming right here per senior Israeli officials that the supreme leader is gone. Trey, thank you very much. We'll get another update from you shortly.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling.
Senator, if you could stand by with us, we want to bring in our chief national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin. She's got some breaking news to add to what we are learning right now about this operation. Jennifer.
Sandra, I just spoke with a senior U.S. official that confirmed to Fox that the U.S. does believe that Ali Khamenei, the Ayatollah, was killed along with 5 to 10 top Iranian leaders in that initial Israeli strike on his compound earlier today that launched this day of strikes, the last 12 hours. They agree with Israel's intelligence assessment. But what is most interesting to me is that the multiple sources have told me that the strike had to be moved up based on intelligence and this so-called target of opportunity. There was a deliberate decision to accelerate the timeline and to strike during the daytime, which is extremely unusual. Usually the U.S. would not strike during the daytime, but they wanted to catch the senior leadership off guard. It was a Saturday morning during Ramadan, and it was also Shabbat during the day. And that's when Israel took the opportunity and dropped those 30 bombs on the compound, and the U.S. simultaneously launched strikes against all of the military targets that then than we've seen the results of today. I've also learned that the U.S. alone, the U.S. military alone, has carried out nearly 900 strikes in the last airstrikes in the last 12 hours. That is an incredibly high number of strikes in the first 12 hours of this operation, Sandra.
Hey, Jen, it's John here. So the one thing that we sometimes neglect to mention is that, you know, one of the big reasons why Midnight Hammer and the 12-day war were so successful was because Israel had Mossad agents on the ground who were directing activities for the aircraft that were overhead. Do we have any idea? And one of the other things about the 12-day war that was so brilliant on the part of the Israelis is they managed to attract, to bring together top members of the IRGC leadership, and then they eliminated them. Do we know what the Mossad's potential role was here in making sure that they had everybody in the right place at the right time to launch this strike?
I think it's safe to assume, John, that this was an intelligence-driven operation, and the people who have the best intelligence in that region tend to be Mossad. If you look at what happened last summer in terms of Lebanon and the drawing together of those leaders as well, taking out and decapitating Hezbollah, this is a style of attack and strike and intelligence that really only the Israelis are capable of. And so I think it makes sense that it was their warplanes that struck the compound. But I found it very interesting that the U.S. Had to agree to move up the timeline based on this target of opportunity, and that senior officials both in Israel as well as in the United States believe that 5 to 10 top Iranian leaders were killed in that strike, including the IRGC commander killed alongside Ali Khamenei.
Jen, if you could you also give us any further details that we have learned about attacks on U.S. military bases in the Middle East? What do we know at this point?
Well, we know that there have been at least 300 missiles fired by Iran today. Some of them have been missiles, some drones targeting various U.S. military bases. A lot of people may not realize that the U.S. has bases in almost every Gulf country. So from Oman to Kuwait to UAE to Qatar, as well as in Saudi Arabia. In fact, I've just received word from a very senior military source that the U.S. base, the Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, is currently under attack by Iranian ballistic missiles, and that the Saudis are currently shooting down those missiles. But this is a big escalation, and we reported earlier today how significant it was that the Saudis had decided to get off the sidelines and decide to say that they were joining in this operation against Iran once Iran fired missiles into Iranian territory, because they're also firing into some of the areas where oil production is in Saudi Arabia. So the countries like Oman, UAE, and Oman has come off the sidelines as well and is criticizing Iran for the strikes against UAE, Qatar, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia.
Right. I mean, the fact that Iran is throwing all these ballistic missiles at countries in the region, I mean, could be read as the death knell of a regime that is on its last legs. Because
it's certainly a sign of desperation, John. I think that is absolutely correct. And I just meant to mention to Sandra, you asked about the strikes on the U.S. bases. There have been no casualties. So while there has been some incoming, there have been no casualties and no real damage that has interfered with operations.
So if this is indeed Iran just kind of firing everything that it's got at everybody in the region as it crumbles, the question is, how many ballistic missiles does it have? And I'm sure that our ability to defend against them is finite. I mean, how much do we have left in terms of missile defense?
Well, I think we have plenty of missile defense right now. I mean, it's not infinite, but what I have learned is that Iran has fired about 300 missiles today. They have about 2,000 long-range missiles and 2,000 shorter-range missiles. That is really significant because they were building up. Remember, a lot of those missile supplies were attrited last summer during Operation Midnight Hammer, but it seems, and sources have told me, that one of the reasons it was so urgent urgent and needed that Israel and the United States felt that they needed to act is that if Iran had had another year, they would have had 1,000 more ballistic missiles. They were building them at such a pace and resupplying despite having lost so many last year.
Jen, before you go, we have a live look at the White House. I'm being told right now we have not heard directly from the U.S. or Iran, for that matter, following the confirmation of the Supreme Leader's death, correct?
We have not heard an official comment on the record statement. I imagine that they would let that be announced by the president.
Got it. And I'm told the pictures that we have right now are new from the Situation Room, guys. I think we're getting our first pictures from inside the Situation Room. Okay. This is from, obviously, Mar-a-Lago, as the president traveled there yesterday after he left Texas from Mar-a-Lago as this decision was being made. Okay. Jen Griffin joining us by phone on the breaking news. Thank you so much.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling.
I want to bring in now CBS News contributor Masih Adlinejad. You have lots of reactions, as I gather it, from our control room to what has just been released by Central Command. Please let my audience know what that is.
I'm being bombarded by different emotions. And this is the moment that Iranians, my people, are experiencing different feelings, pain, and at the same time, hope, concern, and at the same time, hope. And I repeat that because that can be the beginning of a future that people of Iran have been waiting for this moment for 47 years. You know, let's just make it very clear. Now, when I talk to Iranians, for 1 second, they scream out of joy when they hear that their killers finally being the target of the U.S. government and they see justice. But at the same time, they are worried. They're concerned that if this is not going to lead regime change, that if this is not going to be the end of this regime, and if the American government, the Israeli government, only target the military leader, not the political leaders, then the people of Iran are going to be left alone on themselves by a wounded ISIS, by a wounded regime and government, and that's going to be a huge risk for my people inside Iran. I have family there, my parents, my brothers, my sisters, all my beloved people, they live there. But believe me, we don't want people like Zoran Mamdani or some of Americans lecture us about peace, about war, because this is a war being brought to us Iranian people by the Islamic Republic, by the warmonger Revolutionary Guards. And this is the moment that Europeans should join the U.S. government, should join the Israeli government to end the Islamic Republic. If not, believe me, this regime will end democracy, will end American citizens' life everywhere, because the Islamic Republic is like cancer, and they will infect the rest of the world if we don't remove them.
Masih, we'll get to Zoran Mamdani, the New York City mayor, in a moment, I promise you, but you have lived experience with this, and there is something I want our audience to appreciate. There are tentacles within Iran's secret police and secret military services. They have tried to take out Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, John Bolton, National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, and you. Talk to my audience about that.
And me, an unarmed woman, I don't carry any weapons. I am just being the voice of millions of voiceless people in Iran who say no to Islamic Republic, who wants to have a normal life, who wants to have dignity. I know you don't want me to talk about Zoran Mamdani, but look, I don't feel safe in this city, New York, because of the Islamic Republic. And now I won't feel safe when people like Zoran Mamdani talking about safety, but sympathizing with the Islamic Republic who tried to kill me, who massacred more than 40,000 innocent people. How dare you? When you kept silent, when you were absolutely silent, when my girls, women being shot in their eyes, when more than 32,000 innocent unarmed people being massacred, when their parents, their family members burying them, but they don't get the chance to talk like Zoran Mamdani to the media. And now I see the mayor, finally he found the time to actually sympathize with our killers, not with the people of Iran. Really? You think that just talking about peace and talking about like no to war that makes you a good person? Believe me, you need to look into the eyes of Iranians, those who have faced war. You need to talk to the people of Iran who know in the region, Syria, Iraq, even people in Venezuela, that they have seen how the regime in Iran invaded their countries. We're talking about a regime that raped women for simply showing their hair. And of course, Zoran Mamdani was busy celebrating Hijab Day without actually talking about people getting killed simply for showing their hair. Like, listen, if I show that bit of my hair, I get killed. Like Mahsa Jina Amini. He kept quiet. I know that. A lot of Democrats here in America, I'm talking directly to you, my fellow American citizens. I'm talking to you. This is the Berlin Wall moment of Iranians. We are the East Germany. We are the East Germany. And believe me, we don't want war, but we don't want the warmonger regime. Help us be the voice of Iranians to bring the wall of dictatorship down. And that could have been done 47 years ago when President Carter was in power, when the Islamic Republic took the American diplomats hostage. Yes, they let them go, but they took the entire nation, Iranians. They took the entire Middle East hostage. And this is the time, if we bring the wall of dictatorship down in Iran, believe me, the consequence is going to be bigger than the fall of the Berlin Wall, because this is going to guarantee global security.
Let me read for you, because my audience probably saw it, but I just want to read what exactly the New York City mayor said. Today's military strikes on Iran, carried out by the United States and Israel, mark a catastrophic escalation in an illegal war of aggression. Bombing cities, killing civilians, opening a new theater of war. Americans do not want this. They do not want another war in pursuit of regime change. They want relief from the affordability crisis. They want peace.
Oh, my God. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. I live in New York, Mr. Mamdani. You are more than welcome to come to one of my safe houses. You are more than welcome to come and see my would-be assassin in the federal court. You didn't even dare to come and face them. Where were you when they sent killers here in New York City? You were crying for your aunt because she stopped using subway for simply in an illusion statement you made saying that she didn't feel safe because of wearing hijab. Really? I stopped using subway because of the would-be assassins being sent to beautiful New York City by the Islamic Republic. I know maybe you and many other people, they hate President Trump, but believe me, this is not the right time to shift your hatred and your anger from President Trump to the people of Iran, innocent people. We are better allies to you, America, compared to these backward mullahs.
I also want to give you some other information we've just gotten in my ear. So in an address a short time ago, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there were signs that Iran's supreme leader is, quote, no longer. But he didn't go anything farther than that. He didn't confirm his death, but he did say no longer. What does that indicate to you, if anything?
So if he's really dead, this is a day of celebration. I call every Iranian, every American, if Ali Khamenei is gone, do not mourn. Do not even dare to mourn for the killing of a terrorist, because removing a terrorist is not tragedy. It's a sign of justice. Let's not forget Nida Agha Sultan. Let's not forget Pouya Bakhtiari, Peshman, Mahsa Jina Amini, Aida the doctor. Let's not forget the innocent, unarmed civilians being killed because of him. He ordered my killings 3 times. He ordered the killings of innocent Iranians for 47 years. And that's the dream of me, to be alive, to tell Iranians, celebrate this moment. When Osama bin Laden was killed in America, what did Americans do? My fellow American citizen, what did you do? Did you mourn the killing of Osama bin Laden? No, because you saw this as a sign of justice for the victims of September 11. If Ali Khamenei is killed, this is a sign of justice for the family members of thousands of unarmed, innocent people who have faced a massacre, who have been executed because of this guy. Do not dare to mourn for terrorists. And I hope this is the truth. And I'm sure that millions of Iranians will celebrate the killing of their terrorists. You made my day, and I hope the news is correct.
We will await any further word from the Israeli government or the U.S. government on that. Masih Ahmadinejad, Ahmadinejad, thank you very much.
I hate Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad is the former...
Ahmadinejad.
Yes.
Masih, thank you.
Thank you
very
for
much.
having me in this moment. It's a crucial moment.
Joining me now, we have Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and is an Iraq War combat veteran. Congressman, it's always good to speak with you, but let's get right into Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who spoke to the Gang of Eight about the strikes, all but one, we are told, who was unable to be reached at the time. But Congress was not briefed. President Trump, in his own words, said he is pursuing war and regime change without congressional approval and without clearly showing there is an imminent threat to the U.S., though certainly military and diplomatic personnel in the region are now on high alert. But what is your immediate reaction to this assault? And will Congress assert its authority to decide whether to take our nation to war?
My immediate reaction, Alex, is this is illegal, it's unconstitutional, and no matter what kind of threat the Iranian regime is, I don't like the Iranian regime, it's something that you have to come to Congress and the American people to authorize. It seems like the only permission he sought was Benjamin Netanyahu's. He certainly didn't consult Congress, and that is his constitutional duty to do that. It also feels a lot like Iraq 2.0. If you think about the two foundational mistakes that Bush made going into Iraq, one was that the whole war was based on a lie about nuclear weapons, and number two, there was no plan for the day after. Well, that seems to be playing out right here because we obviously were lied to by the administration when Hegseth and Trump said that they obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons. That's pretty obviously the case since just months later now we're attacking those same facilities, apparently. And there's clearly no plan for the day after. The administration can't even clearly decide what they're after. Are they after the oil? Are they after the nuclear weapons? Are they after regime change? I don't think that there are many American parents who would say that their kids are worth losing their lives for Iranian oil.
In his address overnight, Trump acknowledged there could be U.S. casualties, saying, quote, American heroes may be lost. That often happens in war. Iran retaliated with strikes on Israel and several neighboring nations with U.S. military bases. How concerned are you, sir, about risks for U.S. service members and about the possibility of boots on the ground in Iran?
There are tens of thousands of American troops in the Middle East and an untold number of civilians. And there are tens of thousands of Iranian missiles pointed at those troops and those civilians. And Iran's regime right now would want nothing more than to kill a bunch of Americans in response to these attacks. Now, it may not be the president's plan to put troops on the ground, but it's pretty hard to imagine what kind of regime change he's going to get if he has no control over that situation on the ground. And I think the biggest concern I have is that we lose some pilots. Some pilots get shot down, they bail out over Iran. Iran has a long history of dealing with American hostages. We do not want to be in that position again. And if we have to put troops on the ground to rescue downed American pilots, it could be a recipe for a lot more trouble.
Yeah, that would certainly put special forces in harm's way potentially. But
or
let's
Marines.
talk about Trump.
But, you know, I had that mission, actually, Alex. My platoon was the TRAP platoon, the Tactical Recovery of Aircraft and Personnel platoon during Iraq. We got launched in response to a C-130 that was shot down. And you know, when you're out there on the ground just trying to recover a plane or pilots or whatever, it's a very precarious position. And it would be very easy for ground troops to assault and to start a ground war, whether you want one or not.
Trump has implored Iranians to overthrow their government after the U.S. assault, saying, quote, it will be yours to take. This probably will be your only chance for generations. So those remarks don't suggest the administration has a detailed plan for what comes next for Iran. Why is Trump pursuing regime change? Vaughn here in the studio has discussed it. You've put out hypotheses. But also, is there a roadmap? Does it even exist for Iranians to do that? Is it possible a more extreme government could replace the current one?
It's actually the last question you raise, Alex, that concerns me the most, that we might get regime change, but it could be an even worse regime. And the ingredients for getting a worse regime would be to empower the hardliners in Iran. Well, I'll tell you what, the best way I know to empower hardliners is to attack the country, to prove them right, that America's the evil enemy. You know, it's amazing how much public support there is for America over the years in Iran. Among the Iranian people, a lot of them really like America. So you want to find a way to turn them against America? We'll start dropping a bunch of American bombs on their schools, on their capital city, on their downtowns. And that's exactly what we're doing. So it doesn't seem like the administration has thought this through at all. I'm all for a regime change in Iran. I just don't think it's a good idea for American troops to make it happen.
So Trump's stated goals of this assault, eliminating Iran's nuclear program and missile infrastructure, taking out the supreme leader to effect regime change, it all points to the U.S. entering a protracted war. Military action in the region almost never ends well for the U.S. What are your concerns if this spirals into a prolonged regional conflict, and how long could it take to accomplish everything that Trump wants? And by the way, can it be done from the air and without troops on the ground?
I mean, I'm biased as an infantry officer, but no, I don't think you can do all these things from the air. And it seems pretty obvious that we didn't obliterate Iran's nuclear program from the air. We certainly learned in Iraq that it was a long, hard slog to get any sort of regime change at all, and that had to happen on the ground. And at the end of the day, the one thing the president has said that he wants is a diplomatic deal to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Well, he had that, Alex. He had it, and he tore it up in his first term. And not only did he tore up the agreement, the very agreement that he says he wants today, but as a result of that, we lost our eyes and ears on the ground in Iran because we used to have international inspectors going in on a regular basis to keep track of their nuclear program. We even had cameras monitoring their nuclear facilities. Well, all that is gone because Trump tore up the Iran nuclear deal. And so we're in a much worse position to actually keep tabs on what they're doing, to actually understand the status of their program, to actually be able to intervene if they start breaking the deal that we had. So all of this is a problem of Trump's own making. And the first American troops to die in this conflict, all to do something that he undid himself, have got to ask, why are we risking our lives for this commander-in-chief?
Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton, our friend, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you.
Israel called it Operation Roaring Lion. The United States called it Operation Epic Fury. Whatever the name, today's attack could forever change the Middle East.
Joining me now, we have Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and is an Iraq War combat veteran.
We're following all the angles of the story. I want to bring in CBS News contributor and retired Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, who, as you might remember, served as...
Good afternoon, everyone. We are interrupting the game for just a moment here because there is major breaking news at this hour. ABC News has just learned that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is believed to have been killed in the attack in Iran. President Trump just moments ago confirming the news in a social media post. Killed in that attack led by U.S. and Israeli forces. The 86-year-old cleric had served as supreme leader since 1989, more than 30 years. The U.S. and Israel say they targeted Khamenei and the rest of Iran's top leadership in massive strikes that began early this morning. Israel saying just hours ago that it would continue to target the regime until it has been eliminated. Our Rachel Scott asking the president in a phone conversation late today how long this would last. He said that the outcome, the timeline of this could depend on when we confirmed, the U.S. confirmed, that the supreme leader was in fact dead. Also, Rachel asking the president who will lead Iran next. President Trump telling Rachel that he did not want to explain, but that we have a beautiful plan. I want to get right to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, live at the White House tonight. Mary, what have you learned?
David, the president announcing Khamenei's death in a lengthy social media post. Just now, I want to read through to you what the president is saying. He says, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gang of bloodthirsty thugs. He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems. And working closely with Israel, there was not a thing he or the other leaders that have been killed along with him could do. The president goes on, David, to repeat the claims that we heard him make overnight shortly after this attack for regime change. The president saying this is the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. The big question has been, what does that look like? How does the U.S. and how does President Trump envision that playing out? The president says that hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. But David, the president concludes this statement by saying that the heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world.
For days and weeks to come, and Mary, once this attack was underway today, the president with a stark warning to the American people about U.S. troops.
Yeah, and David, the president, of course, remember, he has long promised not to drag America into these long, protracted foreign wars. But now the president has warned that American lives may be lost in this fight. We do not know how long this is going to go on, whether this will indeed be a long, protracted, prolonged war. The president making clear for now the attack, the strikes will continue, but there are still so many basic fundamental questions about what comes next and what role the U.S. is going to play in the future of Iran, David.
Again, we're going to get back to this hockey game in just moments here. Mary Bruce live at the White House. Mary, thank you. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, from the region tonight. Ian, President Trump moments ago confirming that the supreme leader of Iran is dead.
Yeah, a truly momentous day. If anyone had any doubts what this operation was really about, well, now we know it is regime change. And that has seemed clear pretty much since the first early hours this morning when the president made that pre-recorded address. The attacks have not stopped coming all day from Iran. We're in an air raid shelter at the moment. We're getting air raid alerts about every 10 to 15 minutes, and that's been the case throughout the day, multiple attacks. I think there are a lot of questions now. What comes next inside Iran? Remember, it wasn't just about the supreme leader. It was about an entire edifice that ran the country for almost 50 years since the Islamic Revolution back in 1979. The Israelis are also saying that a significant number of Iran's defense leadership have also been killed in strikes that have taken place today. But there is this enormous security apparatus that has bought in to the regime. The IRGC, the president's talking about them being part of the solution. I think many Iranians, especially those who've given up their lives in recent weeks to call for change, will see the IRGC as part of the problem. Then you have the Basij, this paramilitary force, who are the brutal enforcers out on the streets. You sometimes see them on motorbikes, shooting people at point-blank range, driving into crowds. There is a lot there. There are a lot of people who had a vested interest in the current system, and it won't just be a case of decapitating the leadership and hoping that everything changes. All power, all violent power, in other words, all arms belong in the hands of the regime. The opposition doesn't have any power. But make no mistake, I think for so many Iranians, this is going to be a truly emotional day. This is a day that they've been waiting for so many years, a sign that finally, perhaps, the regime is coming to an end. And wherever this ends up, however many days it takes, the shape of the Middle East will have changed forever. David.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, coming to us live. That's from an air raid shelter. He's reporting from Israel tonight. Ian, thank you.
Let me just read something Donald Trump has just posted on his Truth Social account confirming that Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. This is Donald Trump writing or posting on Donald Trump's account. Quote, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gang of bloodthirsty thugs. He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems. And working closely with Israel, there was not a thing he or the other leaders that have been killed along with him could do. This is the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. We are hearing that many of their IRGC military and other security and police forces no longer want to fight and are looking for immunity from us. As I said last night, now they can have immunity. Later, they only get death. Hopefully, the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. That process should soon be starting, in that not only the death of Khamenei, but the country has been, in only one day, very much destroyed and even obliterated. The heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week. or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world. General Hertling, Iran denies that the Ayatollah is dead. I'm just struck by how much detailed information is in here about our methods, the, quote, tracking systems and the highly sophisticated intelligence that he credits with finding Khamenei, and then the public declaration that the plan is for, quote, the IRGC military and other security and police forces to look for immunity from us. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, yes, way too much information. And open source intel is claiming some things that allowed the Israelis to strike a target that not only hit the Ayatollah, but others that was in a meeting. And that seems to be an indicator of why the attack was surprisingly held early this morning, which is contrary to the way Israel normally attacks, and that's during the nighttime. But all of that is conjecture right now, Nicole, but I think the president just confirmed some of that conjecture to allow people to connect the dots in terms of tracking mechanisms. When we're talking about the media, I mean, we're about 18 hours into this, and to suggest that a regime and especially the IRGC, which is a rabid military force, would suddenly change their coats and change their colors after 47 years of declaring the United States the great Satan seems to be a stretch for me. I don't quite believe that it's been that successful just yet. And you also have an Iranian state which has, you can't say it any other way other than layered redundancy in the IRGC, the Baji militias, the intelligence services, the security forces, and the controls that frame external strikes as proof of foreign hostility. That's what the population has been told. They've also seen regime change in every other country, as Ben Rhodes said earlier, Libya, Syria, Iraq. So when you're talking about a population that may even be dissatisfied with their government, can suddenly rally against what it perceives as an external aggressor, that's a little bit of a stretch in terms of logic and reason for right now. One might hope it would be true, but truthfully, like I said earlier, hope is not a method.
Director Brennan, Donald Trump also writing about the duration of the bombing campaign, saying, quote, the heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world, exclamation point. Your thoughts?
The objective of peace, well, there's going to be a lot of deaths before we're on any better track here. I think what Donald Trump has done now is perpetuating and escalating this escalatory spiral of violence and attacks between Iran on one hand and the United States and Israel on another. For the past 50 years, there has been a lot of strikes on both sides. And during the first Trump administration, if you remember, when the Trump administration took out Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, the Iranians then decided to send people to try to retaliate. And John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and others needed to have security because of that. I don't see any scenario whereby there's not going to be some elements of the Iranian regime, whether they remain in place or filter back into society, who are not going to want to retaliate for the death of the supreme leader. I know we talk about Iran being the most prominent state sponsor of terrorism, but that's through our prism. I mean, the Iranians look through their prism and they see a lot of blood on U.S. and Israeli hands. And I do think that this is just going to further intensify, I think, these feelings that the United States now is just exerting its muscles, its military might, along with Israel, in a way that really is not just unnecessary, but also reckless and unjustified. So it's, as Mark said, the future here, the near future is, I think, very uncertain. And to think that the IRGC is just going to put their hands up Besides, there's going to be a lot of bloodletting, internally inside of Iran. Look what happened inside of Syria. Those who imprisoned the Assyrians, who were the ones that were then, sought and were targeted with the violence. So the situation inside of Iran, I think, is going to be very, very turbulent, very unstable, very uncertain for quite some time. And if a bombing campaign is going to continue for the weeks ahead, I can just imagine how much destruction and death there's going to be that is going to affect so many innocent Iranians as well as the elements of the regime.
David, the president announcing Khamenei's death in a lengthy social media post just now. I want to read through to you what the president is saying. He says, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gang of bloodthirsty thugs. He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems. And working closely with Israel, there was not a thing he or the other leaders that have been killed along with him could do. The president goes on, David, to repeat the claims that we heard him make overnight shortly after this attack for regime change. The president saying this is the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. The big question has been, what does that look like? How does the U.S. and how does President Trump envision that playing out? The president says that hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. But David, the president concludes this statement by saying that the heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world.
For days and weeks to come, and Mary, once this attack was underway today, the president with a stark warning to the American people about U.S. troops.
Yeah, and David, the
Kristen Welker, moderator of Meet the Press, is joining us now. Kristen, you just got off the phone with the President of the United States, and he talked to you about Khamenei and the possibility that he may have been killed in strikes. What did he tell you?
This was an extraordinary 3-minute conversation, Yasmin. Let me read you the key takeaways. I asked President Trump if he had confirmation that Ayatollah Khamenei has in fact been killed. He said to me, I've spoken to a lot of people. We feel that is a correct story. Again, when I asked him about the reports that the Supreme Leader has in fact been killed, President Trump saying, we feel that is a correct story. He went on to say, quote, a large number of their leaders have also been killed. And that was significant. The fact that he said this was not just one person, Yasmin, the fact that, according to President Trump, in this phone call that I have with him, he believes it's a correct story that the Supreme Leader has been killed, along with, he says, a large amount of leadership. He says there were 3 attacks, and he says that in some of those subsequent attacks, that is what ultimately killed the leadership of Iran. I asked him when he would know that this operation has been a success. He said it is going very well. We're probably, in terms of 0 to 10, we're close to the 10 spot, if not there. It's going very well. Tremendous damage has been inflicted. The leadership is gone. Large portions of the leadership. They don't know how many, he says, but he says that the leadership has largely been wiped out. from Iran. So a significant
huge news
revelation and development in this 3-minute conversation with President Trump. When I said specifically, sir, how will you know that this has been a success? He said, quote, Yasmin, I think it's already been a success.
When he talks about we're at the 10 spot, Kristen, what do you think he means by that? As in the operation has gone well, or we're almost done, we're almost there?
I think both. I think he is arguing that so far he believes that the United States has hit its targets, that the United States strategy is playing out. It seemed to be that was part of what he was arguing. But I go back to this last statement, and I'll read it to you in full. I was trying to get a sense of just how long this would be. He said, I think it's already been a success. We've inflicted tremendous damage. It would take them years to rebuild. And then I tried to pin him down on a timeline. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, he said he is making a number of calls right now, speaking to other foreign leaders, and had to end the conversation at that point. But in those 3 minutes, again, saying that the U.S. believes that it is a correct report that the supreme leader is killed.
I know this was just 3 minutes, Kristen, but I'm going to ask you to read between the lines a little bit more, which you're very good at. When you were talking to this president, we have heard a little bit about what he wants to happen next, but I think it's important to reiterate for folks what it is he wants to happen next, right? If he's reaching this 10, he feels as if we are almost there. It has been a success. Is this now handing the baton over to the Iranian people to see what then happens, what they're able to do to essentially work towards regime change? And if, in fact, they're not able to pull that off, I mean, there is still the Revolutionary Guard. There are still members of the Supreme Council that are still very much alive. Is the United States, is Israel willing to go back into the ring?
Well, I think that's the big question, Yasmin, about what happens next. In his public comments earlier today, he obviously called on the people of Iran to rise up to seize this moment. I asked him who is going to replace the supreme leader if, in fact, he has been killed. And he essentially said, well, they'll likely call me and get my take on that. He said, I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but it's clear there's a vacuum, that it's not entirely clear. And that's where he points back to the Iranian people themselves to, in this moment, rise up, seize the moment, and carry out regime change in terms of replacing leadership.
From ABC 7, live breaking news.
Now at 6:30, the president addressing the nation after a coordinated attack on Iran. The military operation now underway with Israel.
It has not posted after he posted that video in the early morning hours earlier today, announcing to the world that the U.S. is participating in this operation to essentially strike a serious blow to the Iranian regime, to the Iranian military. We, of course, know about the reporting, and we await to hear from the White House as to whether or not there will be a statement from the president himself about the purported death of the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran. We, of course, stand by to see if the president makes a public statement. Here in Palm Beach, the rain and weather just picked up quite a bit. The president did not have any open press events on his schedule for today, but we are getting a behind-the-scenes look. You saw just there on your screen the vice president monitoring the situation in the Situation Room. The president here in Palm Beach, Florida, monitoring this situation in Mar-a-Lago, meeting with top advisors, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Susie Wiles, his White House Chief of Staff. And there you see, again, that picture with J.D. Vance in the Situation Room at the White House. Certainly a situation that top officials, including the president, vice president, and others, are monitoring in real time. We heard from the press secretary earlier today that the president has been working the phones, speaking with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of the